congratulate my sorority sister, Asia Wilson, on her 2025 Most Valuable Player Award. It is a record setting fourth, making her the first player in the WNBA history to achieve this milestone. Now, from jobs to justice, the federal government shutdown has entered day 12 with no clear path to reopening. The consequences are mounting. Thousands of federal workers, many of them Black women, are missing paychecks. Small businesses are stalled, and vital programs that families depend on are in limbo. To make sense of the on our families, impact on Black women, and the broader attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion we are witnessing, we are joined today by Jocelyn Frye, president of the National Partnership for Women and Families Action Fund. So, Jocelyn, you have recently written so powerfully about what is called the full throttle assault on freedom and democracy. As we watch the federal offices remain closed and civil rights enforcement slow amid the government shutdown, how do we interpret what's really at stake at this moment, particularly for Black women and our families?
Well, first, thanks, Glynda. It's always wonderful to be in conversation with you. I think what I'd say, and what I do say to a lot of people, is that we are here not by mistake. And we should pay close attention to what this administration has done over the past few months. They went quickly at diversity, equity, and inclusion. They use that as the framework for dismantling civil rights enforcement. They attacked the federal workforce that's disproportionately people of color and disproportionately Black women. And all the while, they did it demeaning people, attacking their qualifications, and creating a narrative that somehow they had something that shouldn't belong to them. And that is by design. It is, when I said, talking about attacking democracy, for me, what that really spoke to is that this is part of a long-standing, decades-long effort to fundamentally turn back the clock on Black folks, on women, and Black women in particular. It is intentional, it is targeted, and it is done because they believe themselves to be better. They very much want to lean into a society that advantages some and excludes others. This is part of their ethos. And so I think we should not be confused by that. And the important reason to understand it is because we can't internalize the narrative that they continue to perpetuate that somehow suggests that it's us. It's not us. It's definitely them and their own insecurities and biases that are shaping sort of both their actions and the conversation. So I think we have to understand that frame. But the other reason that I called it an attack on our democracy is because it's not new. This is, the latest iteration of a years-long effort to turn back the clock. And we've seen it before. These are new people, new narrative, but we've seen these attacks before. And so it's important in terms of our own resilience and resolve that we will find a way to push back and fight it because we always have. And they're trying to sort of do a little bit of a fake try to believe that they are invincible, that if they just bully us and beat us, that we will go away. And I think we have to recognize, we can't take that bait, right? Like we can push back, we can fight back. We should fight back. And we have to fight back.
Yeah. So kind of ground us in this conversation. A lot of time in your career around women, family, and girls. So share a little bit about the progress you've seen as relates to protecting our ability not only to survive in this economy, but to thrive. Like, where do we see Black women in this moment in the economy as we walked into um, this very politically toxic and racially divisive time? And what are some of the rollbacks that have been directly impacted towards women and girls?
Yeah, that's a great we certainly can look at a lot of progress, understanding that, the progress that we've made is incomplete. But when you look at Black women, and even when you look at women more broadly, historically, what we know is that women were confined to certain spaces. They were not expected to participate fully in our economy. That meant in terms of the jobs opportunities that they had, and even when they had job opportunities, in terms of their ability to grow in those jobs. It was also true across education. In so many spaces, women had been shut out. And, when I talk about women's progress overall, what I say is that at the heart of women's progress has been a commitment to three things. One is equity, making sure that we tore down the barriers that excluded them. The second is economic participation, allowing women to participate in the economy in the way that they want to. And the third has been around caregiving and care supports, because we know that women are disproportionately in the role of caregivers and often have to manage care. And our ability to make progress along those fronts has been key to women's progress. And if you look at Black women in particular, those have been the linchpin of their progress in terms of accessing jobs, in terms of supports that enable them to care for their families. They're more likely to be caring for their families. If you look at Black moms are more likely than any other group of moms to be breadwinners for their families. They're often disproportionately being the caregivers in their families. So that type of progress has been critical. And we've seen Black women's wages go up, although there's still a pay gap. We've seen Black women move into jobs that they were shut out of. All of that progress has been enormously important. And what we saw up until this administration is the evidence of that progress, even through a pandemic that saw Black women lose a number of jobs and their unemployment rise significantly. We also saw that progress sort of coming back. What we see in this administration is a lot of the foundation for that progress being taken away intentionally. That is the attack on civil rights enforcement and civil rights laws, the tools that have been critical to opening doors. We've seen attacks on that. The ability just to collect the data to track where women are and the progress that they're making, taking that away. The opportunities for just stepping into new spaces. All we hear from this administration is, we don't want women in these types of jobs, or it's an enormous problem. So it's disheartening and troubling, but yet I think indicative of what this administration is about. And the last thing I would say is that we also see this narrative about women not working at all and women having more children. And what we know is that this is an effort really to confine women to certain spaces. And at the same time, we have to be clear as Black women to understand that this is not necessarily about us, right? What they want is more white women to have babies. And at the same time, they tout a narrative that's really about Black women not working hard enough, right? Like when you look at low income women, when you look at folks who are on Medicaid, when you look at immigrant women, there the narrative is about they're not doing enough. We need to make them work harder. We need to make it harder for them to access benefits. We have to be clear about what this moment is really about.
Yeah, you've even detailed more about how the administration's playbook has decimated the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, um, firing civil rights officials. And this week we saw them coming for the New York Attorney General, um, Letitia Tish James. And so, like,
Mhm.
the attack on our leadership, the attack on our longstanding service workers who have helped to build us forward. Can you talk a little bit about the current moment we are in and what the lessons from history should guide us about what our response is? Many people are going, okay, I'm listening, but what is the response that will meet this moment?
Yeah, it's that also is a great question because I do think it's important for people to recognize that these attacks are not a new strategy. If you look back in time, the effort to um, eviscerate civil rights enforcement or make it non-existent, to go after particular people who are trying to expand opportunity, whether it's attorneys general or people in communities, when you see the attacks on law firms and people who help in terms of civil rights enforcement, all of that is very reminiscent of what we saw in the civil rights movement era. And so that's not new at all. I think what it should remind folks is that even despite that, there were still strategies to fight back. That people continuing to come together to lift up their voices and talk about what's really happening on the ground worked then and it works now. It is important to talk about what the vision is for the future, what it means to have a society that is truly rooted in equity and fairness, which most people actually agree with. What does it mean like to have a society where people have the opportunities that they want to have? It's a vision that people want to be a part of. And I think if you consistently talk about where we want to go and don't fall into the trap and be distracted by a narrative that is designed to sort of peel us off and get us involved in a debate that is, nonsensical and um, um, often rooted in fear and division, that's not our secret sauce, right? Like, and that's not how we've been successful. And I think that has always been effective, is to talk about what a vision is for the future, to talk about when you have spaces that are rooted in fairness, that works for everybody. Because many of the things that we're talking about, they may disproportionately affect Black women, but they also affect a lot of folks. And it's why I often say that when you solve Black women's problems, you're solving a lot of people's problems, right? And I think if you look at even the research and the polling, there are just a lot of people who understand that we're better when we create spaces where a lot of people can engage. And we have to stay on message about that, and talk about, not giving special things for one group of people and not others, but focus on fairness and qualifications and equity. Those things matter. They mattered years ago and they mattered now. They matter now. And I think we have to never veer from that course, because um, it's how we have made progress thus far. And the other thing that I say to a lot of people is that we're in this fight not because we've been failing. It's because we've been successful. We've been successful in pushing back against um, an entrenched status quo that wants to exclude certain folks and hold folks in place. And so our tactics, the people may change, but the tactics and our determination around core principles shouldn't change. And if we are, working in collaboration with each other and willing to speak out and speak up, right? And talk about what's really happening to people, um, then, I'm not saying it's an easy fight. It's definitely a marathon and not a sprint. Um, but I think history tells us that if we keep pushing and pushing back, that we win. And that's how I try to focus on it.
Now, the National Partnership for Women and Families Action Fund has been a fierce advocate for decades, right? You have helped to build partnerships across movements, across sectors, and across generations, um, which are essential for a moment like this to protect and expand women's progress. But although we've been focused on the federal government over the last 10 months, states have roll back hard won policies like paid leave and reproductive rights. And we've watched governors and state legislatures roll back the very work we've been in partnership with,
Mhm.
including around protecting voting rights on the state level. Can you share a little bit about how we should be pushing back against state level erosions of our democracy and women's autonomy and our ability to thrive in the economy?
Yeah, I think that point is so important because everybody can do something. We're for those of us who work at the federal level, we have an ineffective, dysfunctional Congress, and it's hard to get anything done. But the good thing is that we do often have greater ability to achieve change at the state level, and that's really important in this moment. And I would say we certainly do see a lot of rollbacks attempted at the state level, but we also see progress. I mean, I think that that's also been important, particularly on some of the fundamental protections that women care about. It is no accident that women in red states have pushed to protect reproductive rights and access to reproductive health care. It is no accident that in some of those red states, the people have pushed on things like the minimum wage. We have states like, New Mexico, where they've done important work around childcare. So I think sometimes when you get caught up in the partisanship of Congress, you lose sight really quickly of what matters to people. And in many states, a lot of the issues that are partisan in DC are not partisan issues, at least when you talk to real people. There are lots of folks who have childcare problems. There are lots of folks who need paid leave. There are lots of women who would talk to you about equal pay. So it is an opportunity to forget about the dysfunction of Washington and to engage with folks at the state level who say these issues matter to me. The fact that my healthcare premiums might go up astronomically matters to me. That matters to Democrats, it matters to Republicans, and it's important to say that. So I think there are opportunities for progress, and there are also opportunities to push back, and for state legislators to hear that, notwithstanding the ideological differences, people expect you to stand up for them. They are all elected officials, and people expect you to defend their ability to, whether it's access the health care that they need, to ensure that the providers that they need are in state and that they don't have to drive 2 states over to access care. Like, those are expectations that it's important for lawmakers to hear. And we will certainly see, particularly in an administration where they're trying so hard to undermine elections, we are certainly clearly going to see a fight about redistricting and all of those things. But I think that there's still an opportunity for folks to speak up and to say, this is what matters to us. And I think for women and for Black women who had to fight so hard for their ability to participate in the electoral process, it is important to say, we earn these rights and we expect to be able to use our right and our vote in a way that's free and fair. And the effort to undermine it is contrary to what our democracy is supposed to be about. and is contrary to why those folks are elected, right? Like those folks have an obligation that we pay their salaries. They have to listen to us. We have a right to be heard, and we have expectations in terms of how they function. So I do think it is critical whether people live in red states or blue states, regardless of the balance of their state legislature. It's critical for folks to go and talk to them about what they see on the ground, and to make sure that they know that people are paying attention, and notwithstanding what happens in the short run. um, People have long memories, and they should understand that too.
Yeah. And I think it's okay. Like, I came to this Sunday fatigued. It is okay to feel fearful in this moment. It's also okay to understand we've got to balance our jobs, our families, and our
Mhm.
activism. But yesterday was International Women's Day. And it's a day for me, I think, is to continue to dream about the possibilities of what women across this globe, Black women across our African diaspora, the possibilities that exist not only for the little inner girl in us, but for the generations that we are continue to fight and hold our power for. So before you leave us today, share a little bit about, what is your hope for this moment? Like, as often it can feel dark and fearful, but like, what is your hope and what is your kind of call to those that are listening today of how we can reclaim and hold the power and the leadership that we know Black women to have in this moment?
Well, in many ways, I should just say ditto, Glenda. I mean, I think your words were powerful. And I think, for me, what gives me hope is just reminding myself that we're not here by accident, and that we stand on so many Black women's shoulders. Um, uh, People who could never have imagined that we would be in this moment. And while this moment is a hard moment, um, there is nothing that we are experiencing that women before us haven't experienced. The people may be different, but the pain and the challenge and the barriers and obstacles are not new. And in many ways, um, it's not that it's easier, it's just we're positioned differently because we have tools, we have experiences, we have expertise um, that many times they did not have. They didn't always have the benefit of knowing what the possibilities were. They could only dream about them. So, for me, I draw a lot of strength from that. I draw a lot of strength from Black women who had no reason to fight and believed that they would be successful, but nonetheless did it because they believed in something bigger than themselves. And I think that's our obligation today. I draw a lot of strength from the community of Black women, including you. And we come together. We're tired sometimes, fussy, all the things. It's messy out there, but it also is um, a powerful community. And when I'm in that community, I know there is nothing we cannot do. Even if the moment is hard, we will get through it. And I hope that we are creating a space for those young women across the world to also build on it and go further and do more. I don't know what's going to happen on a lot of stuff, but I have enormous confidence in Black women, and that gives me hope every day. And I think it should give all of us hope, because I just think that that's why they're fighting us so hard. But it's not enough to overcome where I think we will eventually get to.
Well, Jocelyn, Frye, thank you for stopping by Sunday Brunch, and thank you for your leadership in this moment.
Thank you, Glynda. Always, I'll brunch with you anytime. Thank you.
Black women are feeling it in this moment. We're 9 months into an administration that seems to be intent on chipping away at everyday rights. The government is shut down and there is no end in sight. Black women are losing their jobs in record numbers. And this week, we were all taken aback by the news that the administration has gone after New York Attorney General Letitia Tish James, a woman who has fought tirelessly for justice and accountability. Let's take a look at Attorney General James' response to this week's attack.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding, all because I did my job as the New York State Attorney General. These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost. The president's actions are a grave violation of our constitutional order and have drawn sharp criticism from members of both parties. His decision to fire a United States attorney who refused to bring charges against me and replace them with someone who is blindly loyal not to the law, but to the president is antithetical to the bedrock principles of our country. This is the time for leaders on both sides of the aisle to speak out against this blatant perversion of our system of justice. I stand strongly behind my office's litigation against the Trump Organization. We conducted a 2-year investigation based on the facts and evidence, not politics. Judges have upheld the trial court's finding that Donald Trump, his company, and his 2 sons are liable for fraud. I'm a proud woman of faith, and I know that faith and fear cannot share the same space. And so today, I'm not fearful. I'm fearless. And as my faith teaches me, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. We will fight these baseless charges aggressively, and my office will continue to fiercely protect New Yorkers and their rights. And I will continue to do my job.
I think you would agree it's a lot. So today we want to take a step back from the headlines and talk about what it feels like to live through this moment, where Black women are leading, resisting, and holding the line, but also carrying so much of emotional, political, and spiritual weight on our democracy. Joining us are 2 brilliant voices who have long helped us make sense of power, politics, and people. Please welcome Dr. Christina Greer. She's a political scientist and professor at Fordham University, and Lurie Daniel Favors, the executive director at the Center for Law and Justice, and the host of one of my favorite SiriusXM shows. So please welcome these ladies to unpack this moment. How are y'all?
Among the living and the working, I shall say.
On this side of Glory, as my elders might say.
Right.
So what is not to be blessed?
Right.
We must say that for this moment, I feel like I need to put on my glasses to be part of this brilliant 2 women breaking down. What's happening? We've laid out how heavy this moment is, the shutdown, the rise in job costs for Black women, and the targeting of Attorney General Letitia Tish James. When you 2 take a step back and look at the current political landscape, how are you each making sense of this moment in history?
Well, I'll start, Lurie. Black women have been on the forefront of the struggles for democratic advancement for a very long time, big D and small d. We are in a very precarious moment, obviously, with the federal government. And as you laid out so eloquently, Glynda, some of the financial constraints that Black women find themselves, especially since it seems to be a deliberate targeting of occupations that disproportionately affect Black women in the public sphere. What gives me hope, I'll be very honest, is that one, we actually, Lurie and I start off quoting our ancestors. We actually do have a foundation. We know how to make a way out of no way. I think we're very frustrated that we keep having to do that. but using our political power and also our various networks, I'm very hopeful that we will emerge victorious on the other side of this, because this is, you laid this out, Glynda, last time we spoke. This is a season, and it's a very dark season, obviously, but it is not actually our existence. It never has been, nor will it be. So I'm very measured in the sense that I take this moment very seriously. I'm keenly aware of the constraints that so many Black women are under, but I also want to serve as a reminder, we are the canaries in the mine. We do know what comes ahead, and we have emerged victorious time and time again, as frustrating as it may be to constantly have to do that.
Lurie, I wanted to talk a little bit about um, what this means around the media attacks. There's been a lot of discussion around the advancing the narrative of Black women's leadership in this moment, Black women's circumstance in this moment. Lurie, can you share a little bit, particularly, you spend a lot of time talking to talkers from across, the Eastern Seaboard and the country about real-time ramifications of politically toxic political environment. So can you share a little bit about what you're hearing around the attacks of Black women on the media and what it really means to combat mis and disinformation? And frankly, we've moved into kind of propaganda at this moment.
Thank you for the question, and I greatly appreciate being able to share space with both of you brilliant women. This is a moment where I think, as it pertains to media and misinformation and disinformation, where Black women really represent the embodiment of all of the attacks. So we've seen Black women in media be intentionally called out and pushed out of positions. We have seen how this president has essentially, anytime a Black woman who is in her professional capacity engaging in question and answer the way professional journalists are supposed to be. I'm thinking Yamiche Alcindor. I'm thinking of all the other Black women who have had to confront April Ryan and the absolute vitriol with which he gives a response. I'm thinking about the fact that when Jimmy Kimmel suffered the tragic horrors of being pushed out of a job, everyone seemed to galvanize, and yet I'm looking at nearly 500,000 Black women who have been pushed out of jobs, and there's been largely silence as it pertains to the organizing and the mass swell of support and outpouring that others have received. And so I think this moment really embodies for us a conflagration of all of the pressures, all of the signals that we have sort of known were out there, but they are all seemingly aimed in the same direction at this moment, which in many ways makes it feel, quite frankly, overwhelming. I will say the one thing that I don't think gives me joy in this moment. But the one thing that I cling to is that I know Black women are brilliant. And I know if anybody can figure out how to get out of this situation, it's going to be us. And I wonder if perhaps, and this is just how I console myself at night when I'm stressed the heck out, if our ancestors recognizing that there was going to have to be a massive push to get us to wake up to the true nature of our power, I'm just wondering if maybe this was what had to happen so that we would essentially recognize that they just not that into us. And frankly, we could spend the rest of our years squeezing and contorting and manipulating our bodies to fit within the teeny tiny boxes of acceptability that whiteness and white paradigms allows for us, which is what we have been doing for the bulk of integration. And we can say that that made us successes, but it also gave us hypertension. It also contributed to stress and fibroids and the growth of things in our bodies that we could not understand, but for the fact that we are weathering this constant exposure to racism. So, as bad as all of this is, it is forcing us to grapple with some real conversations about what it is we want for our future. Is the best we can imagine squeezing ourselves into spaces that they are comfortable with, or can we imagine something beyond this? I don't know what that looks like, but I know I'm going to draw on the legacies of Octavia Butler and Toni Morrison and all of the other dreamers and visionaries who knew that, yeah, I mean, we could integrate into y'all, but that certainly can't be the best that we can do. And now we unfortunately, or fortunately, get an opportunity to show and prove.
Yeah, I think Dr. Greer, you've recently, penned a book that kind of connects the history of Black women's leadership and how Black women have been able to stand in our power and exactly what Lurie has said, right, which is that we're going to imagine um, what the possibilities for Black women, our leadership in our community looks like. It's not even the rebuild, it's the completely reimagined. You have an opportunity to talk to Black women, they're students, to our colleagues, to us walking around the community, what are you hearing from Black women across generations about how are they feeling and reacting in this moment?
Right. And so I do believe in these intergenerational conversations as well. And so, Lurie, the book that Glynda's mentioning that's behind me is called How to Build a Democracy, from Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams, because I felt like there were so many people I talked to who, for the young folks, Glynda, so many people Black women had no idea who Fannie Lou Hamer was or Barbara Jordan. So when we talk about book banning, it's like, well, these books have already been banned, right? Our history and the knowledge about the successful Black women and everyday Black women who have made this country stronger and better and more viable have been erased from history in so many different ways. And so I really wanted to make sure that there was another account, especially with this attack on Black women and Black history, to make sure that people of this generation knew about Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan. And also, I teach 18-year-olds. I teach the Intro to Politics class every single semester. That Stacey Abrams' fantastic 2018 campaign where we were all in Georgia, that was 7 years ago. My students were 11 years old. Many of them have no idea of the contributions of Stacey Abrams, how she helped deliver a president and get us out of a particular moment, how she helped deliver 2 senators. So because she didn't quote unquote win, she's not necessarily in the history books the same way. And I wanted to make sure that she was in the history books for eternity, to show the insider and outsider politics that she contributed to. That being said, I am, as an educator, concerned that there's so many Black women who don't know our own history, so we can't lean on our history in this moment. They don't know about Septima Clark. You know, they know about Rosa Parks sitting in the back of the bus. They don't know that she was a rape investigator and just this bold, courageous, audacious woman who did way more than say, I'm not getting up and sitting on the bus. So this idea that I want to make sure that this multi-generational space is very clear about our lineage, you know, and the types of women we come from, and not just the ones who have been in the history books, but the ones who were at the fish fries making sure they raised money for civil rights endeavors, the ones who did actually get beaten and thrown in jail because they refused, to have certain things happen to them at the ballot box, but their names aren't in the history books. So when we get discouraged, I have to remember, just because I didn't read it and I wasn't told about it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And so I'm trying to spend a lot more time speaking to older Black women. A lot of people don't want to talk about these stories of segregation. You know, Lurie sort of alluded to the fact, like, what has integration done to us? Well, there are a lot of Black women, my mother included, who never went to school with white people. And so she's got stories and a certain level of courage and a foundation that I need to know about so I can pass it down to the next generation. And there's this kind of suffering in silence that I think a lot of folks are kind of comfortable with. And they rely on Black women to suffer in silence so we don't share our knowledge and our history together. So that's the moment that I'm in. You know, my grandmother used to always say, shine a light on them. Like, you know, it's like, do not sit in the dark. And so my mission right now, more than ever, is to make sure I connect with Black women, especially in an intergenerational space, to make sure that we are exchanging information across generations so that our elders don't check out and feel like their work was in vain, and that young people don't recreate the wheel and waste time. There's certain things that have been done and there are varying levels of success that we can build upon, but you don't have to build it from scratch and think no one's ever done it before. We need to talk to one another a lot more. And I think for me, what's been so inspiring about my work with you and Higher Heights is that there's always been this space to help us have hard conversations across an intergenerational space.
Yeah. I'm so glad you referenced intergenerationality. I just held a call-in show only for people who had memories of pre-1964 Civil Rights Act. And it was for the elders to really give us a sense as to the wisdom that they hold, because those of us who read about these things or who watched Eyes on the Prize because we have aunts and uncles that refused to let us matriculate through middle school without those experiences, you know, we often approach these conversations or approach these sorts of moments in history from a very analytical political perspective. And I remember we had one elder who called in and they were just like, I just need us to know we don't need them. We just believe that we do. And they were speaking to this motion because we were talking about the fact that this is a very pregnant moment. Yes, it is a moment rife with destruction and devastation, and the fact that for the entirety of my Gen X life, success was how well I could manipulate the education system and change my voice and make white people feel comfortable enough to get access into their spaces. And that was the success model. We go into their communities, we go to their schools, and we learn how to make them feel really good about us. And then we can interview and we can get a job and we can make money and move out of our communities and into theirs. And the pushback to that, I think now, or I guess the white lash to that now, is having been thrust from those spaces, we now have to determine what does success look like without access to whiteness. And while that can feel very daunting, because again, that's my whole Gen X life, right? Like that was the pathway towards success. In the conversation we had with these elders, which I'm now going to be doing once a month because it was so full of goodness and information, we could think of this as a moment pregnant with possibility, because when O.W. Gurley was going out into what we now know as the aftermath of Black Wall Street, there was not anything beyond plains and open land and the capacity to vision and dream and imagine what could be. And what came of that was Black Wall Street, this phenomenal sprawling metropolis in terms of the what was happening at that time. Not the only one, to be sure, one that we know a lot because of what's happening in Tulsa with the fight for reparations for the elders who are still alive from that moment, but and the history that we should know and carry there. But the reality is, when Black Wall Street was being constructed, you had men and women who were like, yeah, there is nothing here right now, but we can envision a train, railroad passing through here. We can envision not just houses, but houses with plumbing. We can envision schools. We can envision churches. We can envision a mail system. We can envision sanitation system. And we can do all that, not just because we descended from Africans who understood what it was to create civilization in the midst of deserts and forests and did so phenomenally while creating math and science, while creating libraries, while creating a value for knowledge and education. But we can do that today and draw on the lessons of those ancestors, because a lot of times we draw on the lessons of our enslaved ancestors and then we forget that there are millennia of ancestors prior to that we also need to tap into, and think about what this moment provides for us in terms of capacity to build a success model that relies solely on us. The challenge many of us face is that we don't believe us can make it without them. So we do have to, in this time, also confront internalized feelings of inferiority and doubt that we can make it on our own. And that's something that we're going to have to work through. And there's something therapeutically. I've got some projects that I'm pulling together to try to contribute to that space. But this is a devastating time unless we think of this as a forced clearing of a forced creation of a blank slate, a canvas that has now been whitened, or no, not whitened. That's the wrong phrase. A canvas that has now been cleared so that we can paint and envision and draw a new artistic rendering of what freedom and liberation for Black people looks like without having to squeeze ourselves into boxes that only whiteness can understand.
Well, Lurie, thank you for that visioning forward. I had an opportunity to go to Ghana with Vice President Kamala Harris in 2023, and when I stood on at the door of no return, that's kind of what I felt, right? What that our ancestors believed on. I'm Glynda the Good Witch. My parents said they didn't name me after Glynda the Good Witch, but the whole notion of believing on the other side of the rainbow. But as we envision the possibilities, we know we live in the current realities. And so I want to leave us this Sunday brunch because Christina loves to brunch. It has been a rough week. It's been a rough 10 months. We know that it is going to be rough in the unseeable future. But as y'all mentioned earlier, we also have to make sure that we rest radically and quick so that the next day we can reset for the fight. So what are y'all doing right now in this moment to just reset to be able to continue? Like last night, I'm supposed to be doing my yoga exercises, my physical therapist. I never do them. They're so easy. But last night, the tension all over my body, and they're like, and frog pose. And so I'm really recommitted that twice a day, I'm going to try to get rid of the tension.
And I think we need to recognize what we're holding. I've started going back to acupuncture to help relieve some of that because I'm like, oh, I'm fine. But I realize I'm holding it tight. I'm a birder. To me, nature is church. And it is the greatest gift I've ever given to myself. to spend time in nature, walking around, listening to the birds. I feel like I'm a better listener to people now. I feel like I can give myself and others more grace the more time I spend in nature. You know, Lurie talked about interviewing older women. Just as a footnote to that, when I've done that, the interesting for the Tenement Museum, what I found is that Black women oftentimes of a certain age say, no one's ever asked me my story. No one. Because I'm just regular, right? I'm not Shirley Chisholm. I'm not someone who's an elected official. So I always remember that when I try and talk to older Black women. We have these amazing stories. But to finalize your question, Glynda, I spend time with Black women. I need to spend time with Black women. That is my energy. I drink a lot of champagne with Black women. I think laughter is an anecdote. We can always find joy. When my grandfather says, I'm among the living and the working, two things that people wish they could say they had, I take that to heart. And I'm just trying to slow down. I'm not always successful, but I am trying to slow down. And for me, primarily spending time in nature helps me do that.
So I can't call myself a birder, but my favorite physical activity is walking or running outside with headphones in while I'm listening to nothing at all but the sounds of nature around me. So I echo that. And you know, my daughter and I have a great event we're going to tonight, and we're going to go celebrate the queens of hip hop. Last night, Brian and I had to get a little crunk because, you know, you got to make sure you handle all your energy and your tension. So we got a little crunk with it. We was grown, right? So I am pouring into fun. I am going to be making as much time as I can to be with my sister friends, and not even to like go out, just to be in the same space and just gather and be in those moments. And I would remind all of us that years ago, there were reports that the military had been studying the role of gathering for Black women, and this was because it was seen as potential suicide preventative for soldiers. And so I think that we should just remind ourselves that there is such power in us being in the same space, loving on each other, pouring into each other, that other entities have decided that that is something that they should study for the preservation of mental health for other people. So if we say nothing else to anyone else, but just to ourselves, there is such power in Black women coming together. And I am just ever grateful that Higher Heights exists. Glynda, I tell you this all the time. I'm just glad y'all exist and that I am alive at the same time that Higher Heights is thriving, because we need it now more than ever. And having as much fun and joy as I possibly can in between the crazy has become my lifeline.
Because they're going to be crazy. So, as I said, when he first got elected, this man is not going to drive me into an early grave.
I know that's right.
He will try, but he will not succeed.
And we'll see that will prevail. So thank you to Lurie, Daniel Favors, and Dr. Christina Greer for always coming to Sunday Brunch and brunching with us and ensuring that we have all the information we need to be informed, engaged, and to take action. So until next time, thank you. I'm going to take my glasses off. So
thank you.
Thank you. What a powerful show. From Jocelyn Frye grounding us in the policy realities shaping Black women's lives, to Christina Greer and Lurie Daniel Favors helping us process how Black women are navigating this political moment. We know that Black women's courage reminds us that truth is still a form of power. Today's conversation was a masterclass in strength, strategy, and sisterhood. And we couldn't close without the powerful reminder from Bishop Leah Daughtry that even in chaos, our faith keeps us rooted. At Higher Heights, we believe that when Black women lead, democracy rises. And today's show is proof that no matter the storm, we continue to lead with clarity, courage, and community. Thank you to all of our guests and to each for spending your Sunday afternoon. Until next time, stay informed, stay grounded, and as always, let's keep leading.
Black women are an unstoppable force. From the moment we arrived on these shores, we have been the backbone of survival, the architects of progress, the keepers of hope. And we remind the nation once again, there is no justice without us. There is no democracy without us. There is no future without us. We are the daughters of Harriet, who never stopped running, of Sojourner, who declared, "Ain't I a woman?" of Shirley, who demanded to be heard, of Barbara, who blazed a trail, of Fannie Lou who told the truth, and of Dorothy who stood tall. They understood that freedom is never given, it must be taken. Rights are never gifted, they must be defended. And power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. And here we are, sisters, at a time when everything we have fought for is under attack. They are coming for our votes with voter suppression laws. They are coming for our bodies with rollbacks on reproductive freedom. They are coming for our children with book bans and attacks on Black history. They are coming for our economic security with devastating job losses and policies that keep us at the bottom while others reap the benefits of our labor. Make no mistake, they are coming for our very presence in the public square, to silence, to erase, to intimidate. But here's the good news. They have forgotten who we are. We are the ones who raised this nation's children, who built its movement, who saved its democracy. Just ask Georgia, just ask Alabama, just ask South Carolina, who carried the ballot box on their backs when others faltered. And so I say to you, this is not the moment to shrink. This is not the moment to whisper. This is not the moment to wait until the next election or the next cycle or the next leader. This is the moment to rise. Because when Black women show up, policies shift. When Black women lead, communities thrive. When Black women refuse to bow down, nations are transformed. But sister, let me challenge you. It is not enough to simply have a seat at the table. Sometimes we have to build the table. And sometimes we must flip the table when necessary. It is not enough to celebrate being the first. We must make sure we are not the last. It is not enough to talk about equity. We must demand it, legislate it, and hold every system accountable until it bends. The threats are real. The danger is clear, but so is our power. And if we believe, as the scripture says, that faith without works is dead, then now is the time for the work of organizing, the work of policy making, the work of protecting one another, the work of claiming our inheritance as the moral leaders of this nation. America cannot survive without us. America cannot thrive without us. And I promise you, that when we rise together, there is no power on earth that can stand against us. So let us leave this place, let us go forward, not just inspired, not just encouraged, but ready to fight, ready to lead, ready to change the very ground beneath our feet. The time is now. The people are us. The future is ours to write. Let's get to work.